I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a slightly revised agenda in front of us. It's been modified. There's been a nominal modification since it would have been sent out last Wednesday afternoon. There was a supplemental budget request made by the fire department that will be considered at a later date. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members Seo, Dillon, Kamara Sulak, and Kraus. Mr. Delorco did indicate earlier this evening that he'll likely be tardy to tonight's meeting. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, and Community Development Director Green, along with Parks and Rec Director
Harrington.
Scruggs. Did I say Green again? Verbal tick. My apologies. Sorry about that. Ben Harrington, our Community Development Director, is with us. At this time, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended unless there are additional modifications.
So moved as submitted.
Moved. Will you approve as amended?
Amended.
Yep. Okay. And was that seconded by Seo or Kamara Sulak? Seo. Thank you, Jack. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We'll hold off on excusing the absence of Councilmember Delorco because I believe he will be here momentarily. So we will transition then to my charter-mandated State of the City address. Good evening, City Council, City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, distinguished guests, and my fellow Salinians. It is an honor to provide the citizens of Saline with my mid-year State of the City address. As I articulated this past January, this past year and these last 6 months have been both challenging and unprecedented. We've endured the lingering effects of a global health pandemic, subsequent disruptions to supply chains, increased labor shortages, and burgeoning inflation. But I am not demoralized, and I am not disheartened. I look at hard times and say this too shall pass. Despite these challenges and hardships, 2022 will continue to be a year of progress and productivity. Now, as I've mentioned before, but this bears repeating, based on our strong track record of the past several years, it should be crystal clear to all city residents and business owners that the days of infrastructure delays and deferrals are over. The city, and the council more specifically, will continue to act boldly and invest robustly in our municipal streets, sidewalks, and water and sewer systems. As such, let's begin tonight with infrastructure. In the coming months, our city will invest heavily in our municipal assets, and residents can expect to hear more about specific projects at some forthcoming town hall events. Additionally, our website now features dedicated project pages for all current and pending infrastructure projects. It's a great resource to get information about project statuses and timelines. Further, recent investments in our water infrastructure have already yielded significant results, i.e. a substantial decrease in water discoloration complaints. By way of example, the city received 62 discoloration complaints via our survey tool in May 2022, and just 3 in June 2022. As always, if residents experience water discoloration issues, they are encouraged to use our online survey tool, of course, located on our website, to report concerns. Please rest assured the city will continue to use this reporting tool to properly direct resources and maintain these improvements. Also, the city will continue our valve assessment rehabilitation initiative, knowing, of course, that this project has a direct and unambiguous impact on water quality and clarity. Additionally, due to the significance of these issues, DPW and our city's PR department will continue to produce our recurring newsletter. Each of these newsletters contains substantive messaging on both water quality and other timely issues. Separately, the city's meter changeout program is underway. Educational materials will be released soon to help residents better understand the process and how the online tool can be used to improve communication with the city. Additionally, as many are aware, the city's water treatment and wastewater treatment ad hoc advisory group continues to meet bi-weekly to provide advice and review of projects and initiatives related to these vital services. And speaking of our wastewater treatment facility, our plant's rehabilitation project is currently in the process of being scored by the state for revolving fund financing. Further, we expect to know later this fall about our ability to qualify for a low-interest rate loan. Subsequent to this, we will move forward expeditiously with bidding and construction of said project. Further, as referenced in January, our city engineer, Tesha Humphreys, has begun working diligently to develop asset management practices for all municipal infrastructure, with a specific emphasis on drinking water and wastewater systems. This includes new technology, tools, and programs to evaluate risk and prioritize capital and O&M practices. Ultimately, proper asset management tools will shift decision-making from reactive to proactive and thereby improve infrastructure quality throughout our city. As noted previously, the city will continue to advocate for state funding for stormwater infrastructure and will aggressively compete for recently approved federal funding under the new bipartisan infrastructure statute. In fact, we are actively soliciting for an $18 million federal grant to assist with the rehabilitation of our wastewater plant. We'll also look to leverage state and federal resources as we continue to evaluate and explore the future of our Mill Pond Park Dam. In 2022 will also be an active year on the sidewalk front. The city will begin design work of the US 12 sidewalk from Mill Pond to Austin Drive. We will also reactivate our comprehensive sidewalk initiative beginning in Northview subdivision and possibly expanding depending on the number of deficiencies and the impact to the city's general operating budget. Transitioning now to economic development, we are acutely aware of the challenges our business owners and workers have experienced and will continue to experience in the year ahead. On August 5th, the city, in conjunction with the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce, will be hosting our annual Large Business Summit. We've confirmed some excellent external presenters whose presentations will focus on talent recruitment and retention. This promises to be a great event. RSVPs are required, and any questions or comments may be directed to our PR generalist, Sarah Massey. Further, in the third or fourth quarter of this year, the city will organize and host our annual Small Business Forum, focusing on the needs of our service enterprises, retail establishments, and numerous restaurants. With the addition of our new Community Development Director, Ben Harrington, we are working to reactivate our community recruitment and retention team, comprised of representatives from the city, chamber, Saline Main Street, and Saline area schools. Additionally, I am keenly aware that the best thing any of us can do during uncertain economic times is to patronize our local businesses. If you value our community's enterprises or the products and services that they provide, please show them some extra support in the weeks and months ahead. Later this summer, the city will begin revising our master plan with a renewed emphasis on our historic downtown. Our downtown is the heart of our community, and as a city, we must actively work towards making it the place to gather, relax, and make new connections. Further, throughout the master plan revision process, we will re-emphasize our various community assets, including parks, green space, strong residential neighborhoods, and our numerous commercial centers. I'm also pleased to report that the sale of Saline's long-dormant hotel now appears to be imminent. Staff, myself, third-party consultants, our fire chief, and several architects and the potential buyer have met and recently toured the facility. Barring something unforeseen, this potential developer hopes to close on the property later this summer, and I'm hopeful that construction activity will resume shortly thereafter. Our Community Development Department is proactively performing code enforcement on properties that have been blighted, damaged, or vacant. Saline cannot and will not tolerate properties that are unattended and or magnets for blight. The city is actively working with owners to repair said properties or encouraging them to sell parcels to individuals interested in bringing their talents and passions to the Saline community. Also, I expect City Council to adopt a residential rental inspection ordinance later this summer. This will ensure quality housing standards for all local renters. In the very near future, we will begin a comprehensive review of all existing site plans to ensure that commercial and industrial properties are meeting standards that were approved and or authorized by staff and the city's planning commission. These site plan reviews will place the strongest possible emphasis on public safety while also improving the attractiveness of parcels throughout our community. The Code Review Committee, a group comprised mainly of private citizens, business owners, remains a great outlet for individuals to recommend policy and ordinance changes, particularly if they seek to modernize or streamline our city's regulatory framework. As I've stated frequently, our first responders can rest assured knowing that our community's elected officials will continue to provide them the resources they need to effectively serve and protect the residents of Saline. The Saline Police Department is in the process of implementing their body-worn camera TASER initiative. The corresponding TASER policy was recently completed, and training on both the policy and TASER itself will occur within the next couple weeks. The department's goals and strategies, which focus on 4 critical areas: community engagement, education and training, mental health, and recruitment and retention, are still being developed by department personnel and other regional stakeholders. In July 2022, officers Wright and Whited visited with our local police academy for the purposes of recruiting. The Saline Police Department is still working on accreditation. However, with the change in leadership, additional time will be needed to complete this vital initiative. Our dispatch center is currently fully staffed. That being said, our PD is still looking to fill 1 open vacancy in police services. Interested parties are encouraged to visit our website or connect with Chief Radzik or Assistant City Manager El Getzman directly. The Saline Police Department recently hired a new administrative assistant, Joelle Koss, who replaced Lori Fundel, who retired this past May. On behalf of my council colleagues, we wish Ms. Fundel good health and happiness in the years ahead. Now, in my capacity as Fire Board Chair, I'm working to complete an RFP for an independent review and analysis of the Saline Area Fire Department. This analysis will evaluate operations, policies, our governance model, and existing funding streams, with a primary focus on ensuring that our firefighters can effectively meet the needs of our community in the years ahead. As residents are aware, our recently approved budget covering fiscal years 2022 to 2023 demonstrates that Saline's elected and appointed officials remain good stewards of public resources. Salinians can rest easy knowing that during these uncertain times, with costs dramatically increasing, we've exercised the same fiscal prudence and strategic thinking that has been utilized this past decade. Moving forward, Council will continue to prioritize our city's infrastructure, various municipal assets, and legacy costs while maintaining healthy fund balances. Further, I'm confident that we will use existing dollars to create a vehicle equipment revolving fund, and while also reserving the necessary funding to appropriate manage retiree payouts. Additionally, our city's Rec Center Sustainability Task Force will shortly transition into an advisory panel, assisting Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and her staff as we continue to plan for the future of our municipally owned recreation center. Needless to say, our rec center must be accessible and well used by all members of the Saline community without being an undue burden to the city's general fund. As I've articulated for the better part of 2 years now, our changing demographics, coupled with the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, have brought to light the desperate need for additional health care services in the Saline community. Our residents' quality of life is directly linked to accessible, quality health care amenities. As such, our city's Healthcare Improvement Task Force has been working hard to correct this significant and glaring deficiency. While we can't publicly share all their work or their recent conversations with regional healthcare providers, I can state unequivocally that tremendous progress has been made. If residents have thoughts or would like to get more involved, feel free to connect with Chairperson Dawn Krause or any member of the Healthcare Committee. In addition to Rec Center Sustainability, and healthcare, we have other groups hard at work, and we're intensely proud of their efforts. Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI comes to mind, along with our Historic Properties Working Group and our Legal Services Review Committee. As mentioned in January, in either the third or fourth quarter of this year, I'll be requesting that City Council establish 2 new task forces, one to evaluate and review our existing city charter, the second to focus on affordability with a specific emphasis on housing and transit. If residents or business leaders are interested in serving in these capacities, I encourage you to contact my office directly. Last, let me message on openness and communication. Earlier this year, we launched a new, redesigned, and streamlined municipal website. Our new website is far superior to its predecessor, but of course, it is not without its imperfections. If you have thoughts or ideas on how it can be improved, please connect with our IT director, Chris Schonk. I know that he'd welcome your feedback. The new website also replaces C-Click's Fix with a new reporting tool, allowing residents and business owners to engage directly with staff. However, after communicating directly with City Manager O'Toole, we are not completely satisfied with this new technology. As such, alternatives will be considered and improvements will be made in the next couple months. In addition to our existing surveys on water quality and odor abatement, we recently launched direct communiques to all HOAs and condo associations. If you're interested in if you're not on this list or would like to learn more, please connect with Sarah Massey, our city's PR generalist. As promised in January, we have initiated in-person town halls in advance of all major construction projects, engaging with residents and property owners most impacted by our major capital initiatives. Let me end by acknowledging the years of service and contributions made by my city council colleagues, Mayor Pro Tem Dean Gearbaugh, and council members Janet Dillon, Jack Seo, Jim Delorco, Kevin Kamara-Sulek, and Dawn Kraus. Also, sincerest thanks to our dedicated and talented staff who care deeply for this community and provide exceptional service to our residents on a daily basis. On behalf of council, we thank each of you. Our community would not be the world-class city it is without your commitment and contributions. Further, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the recent retirement of our city treasurer, Mickey Jo Bennett, who served this city faithfully for more than 36 years. Again, we thank Ms. Bennett for her dedication and outstanding performance, and we wish her well on a long and enjoyable retirement. She's earned it. In conclusion, I'm mindful of where we've been and conversely, where we're headed as a community. Challenges and hardships remain, but our renewed focus on core services, investing in our infrastructure, strengthening public safety, while pursuing best practices for organizational efficiency will undoubtedly improve our residents' quality of life. I've said it before, Saline is a special place because of the character and commitment of our residents. We're in uncertain times, and the ensuing months and years won't always be easy, but I know great things lie ahead of us. And yes, I continue to believe that Saline's best days are yet to come. Thank you, may God bless you, and may God bless Saline. We move on now to citizen comments on agenda items under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? Please. Matt, no swearing. Say what you want, but no expletives, okay? Okay. All right.
You guys cannot get it through your thick skulls that we do not need a marijuana shop in this town. We have one over in Ann Arbor. If they want to, they can go use the one in Ann Arbor. But here, we do not need one as Saline citizens whatsoever. If the citizens of Saline want one, then they have the choice to go to Ann Arbor, not here.
You have a minute.
I just seem to think that if you keep wanting to bring drugs back, that we will have high school kids wanting to go and get it along where they can go get their liquor and all sorts of different stuff across the street from the high school. And it's crazy that we even sell it in Bushes, but it's a grocery store. They can put any ID a cash register wants. It's crazy that you guys want to put a marijuana place in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Are there additional comments on agenda items, please?
Changeout fan, local citizen, local entrepreneur. Actually, I should say social entrepreneur. Before entrepreneur is social means profitable, but social issue first. I rise. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to start again?
No, you're good, Changman. Yeah, please continue.
I raise my voice and raise my hand. Salute to you all. You deserve to say you're the best, to accept you're the best leader. You work so many hours. I couldn't believe that payment not match what you have been doing. Not just the time you spend, the quality. Saline is the best place. I was deeply moved by Mr. Mayor and Ms. Bennett. Initiate this job raising, drive all over to try to create jobs. I never see the mayor like that. For the purpose of the future of Saline and to solve the problem, you have done the best. The parks, the staffs, the workers. I rise today, I want to say something. I also have my dear friend JP here, who has contributed, volunteered quite a lot for the purpose. Not just the future of Saline and current issue of Saline. We have a lot of problems. Marijuana, if we can pass the bill, we can also do something of the project of SALT, Saline Area Light Tower. Mr. JP will say something. Look at the seal behind you. That is a tree, evergreen tree. Look at the seal of Ann Arbor. That is a plant. That is a tree. More like deciduous. SALT project is grow and glow. No people have that thought before, but Mr. Jack Seal is the leader of the tall building, radio tower. Nobody believed that should be and should reasonable, but he did. I look at the paper of Mr. Jim Delacour. A lot of scientific research. This team is the best, and the Saline people is the best. Saline located geographically the best. We should, as Mr. Mayor said today, proactively, futuristic, change the game, new paradigm. I have 100% trust on you. I will be the first if next time volunteer, and just let me know. JP also want to say something. My time is over. Thank you.
Well, JP, if I might, because SALT is the Saline Area Light Tower, is not an enumerated discussion item or action item tonight, if you could hold off and reserve those remarks until the end of the meeting, you'll have 3 minutes to speak to it. Okay? And Changman, if you'd like to come back at the end and speak further about SALT, we would welcome that. If you have a comment on an agenda item, you may speak now, but if it's about SALT, we should hold off until the end.
It is event related.
Oh, okay.
Just go ahead.
It's your call.
We got a permission from our staff. That's why.
Okay. If you'd like to speak, you are welcome to.
Hello, my name is J.P. DeNoyer from Ann Arbor, and I gave you some information about the SALT project, the Saline Area Light Tower. I'm one of the software developers. My dad lives at Saline Evangelical Homes, where he is well taken care of. Thank you all, especially the nurses. It was great to see Mayor Morrill at the Celtic Festival, where Changming and I volunteered this weekend. We had a great time, and it was very successful. How nice if in the future we support Saline area festivals with our display technology. There are many awesome events, such as the Food Truck Festival and the UAW Car Show. Following Mr. Jim's advice of working with Saline students, we presented the SALT project to the school board in hopes of benefiting students via Project Leads the Way, and also our idea of community participation and volunteerism. SALT will be a great tourist attraction for Saline and is good for the environment because we use clean energy, wind and water. This project will create 6 jobs: programmer, producer, promoter, assembler, artist, and aviator. When you have a moment, you may read box JJ for jobs and jobs, or box WW, wind and water, on the paper I handed you. Thank you all for the honor of your time. Hopefully we can work together on this project for the future of Saline. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on agenda items? Ben?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm here to talk about the memo that's going to be read tonight about the marijuana ordinance. In there it discusses daycares, but nowhere in there does it discuss daycares which have state mandated curriculum for preschool. And that's what I mentioned in the meeting where I wanted to discuss this. We need to talk about preschools because they're using a state mandated curriculum for children. And now I'm coming to find out that there's going to be another marijuana dispensary coming near my house. And we talked about neighborhoods. I have no problem with the 2 that are going downtown near the car wash and next to McDonald's, which is an existing car wash right now. They're away from neighborhoods. They're away from schools. They're away from ball fields. And they're away from families. And I would like to not vote or just, talk about this tonight because nobody knew when that meeting was to go discuss with code enforcement. I didn't see it advertised. I didn't even know it now when it was meeting. And so, there's a lot of people that didn't even know that it was happening to go and talk about it. And, I know you guys try to be as transparent as you can and communicate as best as you can, but we got to do better. And I really hope, somebody can talk about that tonight. Talk about bringing up not just daycares, it's daycares with preschool programs with kids that are going to go into our schools. A lot of you understand, I support marijuana for those that choose to have it. But we don't need to open the floodgate and have 20 businesses in this town. We don't. Because one of those businesses is going to go to a vacant spot that maybe could have been a local community member opening up their own business. And, they're coming in and throwing money at these people to buy them out and take away opportunities from other citizens. We got to talk about this. We need to have some better ordinances and kind of dictate how many of these businesses do we need in this town. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to turn into an Adrian, where you're going to have 14, 15, 20 of them in there. And then within a year, half of them are going to start closing up. And then some more are going to try to come in. And guess what? They're going to close up within a year. We need to have a discussion on how we want this to look. And you need to involve the community. Because we're your taxpayers. We're the ones that came here for the schools, for our children. And we're the ones that are concerned about safety. I've seen the negative sides of impact. I agree, for some people it works. But I've seen a lot of kids that I coached, that I taught, I've seen it destroy their lives. So there's good and bad with all this. We have to have discussions about this as a community. And so I encourage you guys to have a town hall so we can open this up and have a community discussion and talk about it in a civil manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items?
Hi, my name is Alex Padla, and I am here on behalf of Puzzle Group. We are kind of the puzzle piece in between folks like yourselves, the municipal governments, and cannabis operators. And I think that it's very prudent and a really good idea to take into account what these 2 gentlemen have said here earlier today about, operators coming into your town and being good citizens and good employers, and providing opportunities in, a time when, jobs may be scarce and things of that nature. We all see it in the news. And just wanted to say hello, introduce myself. I've already blown up Ben's phone a couple times trying to just feel out your ordinances and things, but I just want to say hello and just assure everyone in this room that, operators want to look for mutually beneficial relationships between them, the city, and the people who live here. We want to respect your processes and the laws that you make, and we want to listen to the community and as well as the elected representatives. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to being able to work with Saline and the people of Saline in the future. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your comments. Are there any additional citizen comments on agenda items? The record will reflect there are none. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written communiques in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? Very good. Then we'll proceed with the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion.
Mayor, I'd like to remove C 22-163, fireworks committee appointments.
Okay, that will go to, that'll be the first item under new business. With that, then, do you want to move to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Yes, sir.
Okay, moved by Gearbaugh to approve as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Then we'll be looking now for a motion to approve the appointments to the fireworks committee as submitted.
Move as submitted.
Moved by CO. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamir Sulak. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Although I know the community really is in support of a fireworks and those type of things, I think the expense, the time that's going to be involved at this point, without all the activity and things that are going on right now, I believe, including the liability and concerns, that it should be a separate organization outside of the city, and that we don't necessarily need to be supporting yet another festival or event where it potentially could become a clear liability or draw on city resources. So I will not be supporting this moving forward.
Very good. Any additional comments? I don't have any objection to it eventually becoming its own entity, but I don't think the framework infrastructure exists currently. But that's something something I would certainly encourage the committee to discuss at one of their upcoming meetings, assuming that it is approved and the individuals are appointed later this evening. Are there any additional comments? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I'll just comment as I am the proposed chairperson for this committee. I have worked with fireworks committees in the past to bring fireworks to Saline. There are a lot of moving pieces to bringing fireworks to Saline, and there is a lot of community input. The one thing I will ask is if people have questions, that they direct them to the committee, that they don't take to social media and make speculations about things. It makes it very hard to plan events when people are saying that we're not having them. It just sends out mixed signals. There was a lot of chatter that we were hosting 4th of July fireworks, and then there were a lot of very disappointed children to find out that we were not hosting them. So if people have questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to me or to the city manager, who can funnel them back to the committee at any point.
Very good. Thank you. Anything further? The record reflect there are none. No additional comments or questions. There is a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Kamir Sulak to confirm the appointments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Was that 2 nays? Okay. So motion carries 5-2. Thank you very much. We move on now to new business item 22-164, fee book updates. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the 2022-2023 fee book and to approve or not to approve as submitted.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbox, simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Clerk Royal, do you care to make a statement for the record? Mr. Harrington?
Good evening. Most of the fees that were updated with this fee book and community development were my doing. I have individual justifications in case you have curiosity about each of them or any of them. The big ones, too, there were some typos in the previous fee books as it related to residential, retail, and industrial inspections for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, often referred to as MEP fees. So those were all updated to be the correct number that we've been charging. There was a transformation between going from an Excel sheet to a Word document, and some of that was lost in translation. Another area of interest for you all might be a temporary certificate of occupancies. It's been an issue with some of our new subdivisions for temporary certificate of occupancies that they've been prolonged for an extended period of time. A certificate of occupancy or temporary certificate of occupancy is usually given for lot stabilization and landscaping due to growing seasons. However, some of our developers have taken advantage of this and have had prolonged temporary certificates of occupancy. Sorry, that's a mouthful. So we're now looking to change that for $200 per application and a required monthly renewal to prevent prolonged those. And then lastly, for bond performances, we're now looking to charge $1,200 per unit per application as opposed to the old fee schedule, which had $500 for single and two-family lots, and $300 per dwelling unit for multifamily dwellings. Once again, just to ensure compliance and to make sure that these new subdivisions, as they're being built, have some teeth to them, that the developer can't just walk away from obligations they've established with the city.
Very good. Thank you for that, clear and concise overview. Are there questions for Community Development Director Ben regarding the proposed changes? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple. I saw there were many increases for the cemetery. What were those based on? Just our costs or? Terry.
We'll let Clerk Royal address that.
We thought you were going to do mostly building. The cemetery is based on what the DPW time is. So they haven't been raised in several years. And so they did a very thorough overview, and those were the reasons, the changes for the cemetery.
Any idea what the average increase was? 5%, 10%?
I don't know. Priscilla helped me with them, so she did all the hard work. I just put them in.
They're just sensitive to those fees, and I just wanted to make sure how we were basing them and clarifying that they're based on actual costs.
Now, we didn't raise any of the lot sales costs, but like, I know for a cremation burial in a vault, we were only charging like the $330, but for a vault, you have to actually pull up the cement thing, so it was taking them way more, so that did increase to what a normal burial for a vault burial would be, because it's gonna cost you the same whether you're putting in a full burial or just a cremation in there.
Okay.
So that was one of the reasons why we increased that.
Thank you for assessing that.
Yeah.
If you'll indulge me, Mr. Gearbaugh, are there any other questions relating to the cemetery or matters within the fee book that would fall under Clerk Royal's purview, since she's up at the podium? Okay, there are none. Thank you, Terry. Clerk Royal, excuse me. I'm sorry, Janet did have a question that she thought
You know,
was...
I think my questions, I look at them, I think they're just general, so.
Okay, we'll let Ben address those then. Mr. Harrington, if you'd like to return to the podium. Mr. Gearbaugh, if you'd like to continue your line of questions.
Yeah, and just one other question, Ben, as you mentioned the increase in the temporary occupancy permit, what are we doing in terms of requiring a bond or whatever for completion? There used to be an issue where we'd grant those and we were only like asking $1,000, and sometimes there was significant work that hadn't been completed.
So from my understanding, it depends on the type of lot and what the temporary C of O was given for. So if it was a single home, then bonds aren't usually used in the same way as they are for the larger subdivisions, from my understanding. So like Huntington Woods or Bella Terrace is going to have a different look on how those bonds work than like a single home that was redeveloped, a tear down, rebuild sort of thing. But if you went up to our bond, where, like I said, we're doing $1,200 per unit, which is in line with what Milan and other communities are doing, which is on the lower end, actually. Riverview, for example, charges over $1,500 per bond.
Yeah, and we haven't really raised our 1,200 limit in many, many years.
Well, it was 500 and 300, so now we're pushing it up to being in line, because the last time it was updated was 2013.
Okay,
So-
because I know that in some situations, 1,200 was the number, that's why I was wondering.
Right, and this is specifically for the building department, so it doesn't cover any bonds that would be put through DPW, in which case I would refer to Director Searles on that one. But the temporary certificate of occupancy is mainly to get compliance with them, to complete lot stabilization, to complete the landscaping that they're required to do, and put the onus on them to renew monthly, so that we're able to better track these things rather than having it lapse, essentially. And not
How many months can they renew?
Technically, it would be unlimited, but with $200 a month, you're effectively charging, a rent at that point too. So I imagine we would achieve compliance rather quickly. However, if that continues to be an issue, that's something that we can look into.
But it's a full fee every month, so.
Yes, it's a full $200 fee every month.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. So just, and this would probably be for the city manager, or maybe it's for Ben. Are our fees in line with other municipalities, like surrounding as well as comparables?
That was a point of the city manager, as well as a concern of mine, as well as to make sure that we're not charging above and beyond what other communities are. We're very much in line, if not on the lower end, for some of these fees. And the goal is to ultimately, charge our market rate. What are we actually, for the building department at least, we're making sure we're collecting fees for the cost that for our cost to administer those services. So the net zero kind of idea, which is
Right.
state mandated.
But I know for a while we were actually on the very lower side to where it was an expense. So when you say we're on the lower side, we are still at least at a break even?
Yes, I have no reason to believe that these fees will leave us losing money, I should say.
Okay. And then there's comments about dates, and so fees that haven't been raised in a significant period of time, are those statutory fees that we are not allowed to change?
It would depend on the fee. So we have an annual registration of contractors, which is decided by the state that it can't be over X amount of dollars. I believe it's 20 or 25. So that's a fee that we cannot raise. On the other ones, depending, sometimes it's like the printing costs necessarily haven't gone up that much in the past 20 years. I mean, it costs $10 for us to print something. It cost us $10 to print something then. So for some of the more minor fees, I would imagine that's the rationale behind it. And other ones, they just require more research than the time I was given between beginning this position and starting to figure out how in line our fees are with other communities versus how much are they in line with our costs.
Okay, perfect. And then one last question for you on food trucks and the permit fees for those. So you can pay, there's an application fee, is that a one-time permit fee? And then that's a $50 fee, there's a $150 per permit, and then there's an event permit. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out, do any of those roll into each other? Like if you pay the $150, are you not paying the other two?
I'm going to defer to Clerk Royal on that
Okay.
point because she'll have a better idea. But I can tell you that it's an ordinance that we're aware that has problems and we're working on tweaking it.
Okay.
The 150 right now is usually paid for, because we've only got a few places, Baker's Nook, the Stony Brewery, and Leavier are the three that usually pay the 150, and then each of the food trucks come in and pay $25 for the year to go and park at those locations. That was something that you guys came up, or Mike Green came up with last year, so that the food trucks wouldn't have to pay, each have to pay $150, and it helped the businesses.
Okay. So the $150 is being paid by a business in order to have food trucks on their property. So then, what is the food truck actually paying?
25.
Each time they come, or is that a one-time?
It's a 1 year, and you can do Baker's Nook, or you could do Stony Brewery. Once you've been cleared for your background check and your permit to make sure that you've got all your food handling licenses and all that, and your insurance and all that, then you can operate at any of those three places.
Okay, and are those businesses allowed to then charge the food trucks?
We don't control that. I know Baker's Nook does, but I don't know if Stony Brewery does.
Okay, because I guess I'm just confused by that, and I was confused back in the day, because if the food trucks are paying an additional fee, it seems like that fee should be coming to the city, not to a third party. Because it seems like they're sort of circumventing the process a bit. So I know that Mr. Harrington wants to work on this, on the whole process, and so I look forward to kind of continuing that conversation later. I just was a little confused as to which category.
That's how it's
Actually.
operating right now, so
Okay.
that's,
Thank you.
There's a hand up to my right. Mr. Commander Sulak, please.
Yeah, just one clarification for the temporary C of O. Thank you, Ben. That, just for clarification, that $200 is per property,
Yes.
right? Okay. And that's comparable to other communities, or is that on the lower end?
There's a wide array of ways to handle temporary certificate of occupancies. So some communities are really strict about even giving them out. It really depends on where you are and the growth in which you're seeing. And like I said, there's some context between, is this like a single family build, like the person bought it themselves, they're tear down, rebuilt the lot, and now they'd like to move into their own home, versus how do you handle it when 10 houses in a subdivision are asking for temporary certificate of occupancies. You have a large development group that's promising to do the lot stabilization, landscaping, and all the lots at once. So, Washtenaw County has a bond, I think, for it, but other communities handle it differently, and they do different fees altogether, and sometimes they just don't hand out temporary certificate of occupancies, and it's just an agreement with the certificate of occupancy that you will do the lot stabilization. But that's not a degree of control that I don't want to relinquish, given some of the issues that we've had with subdivisions not actually completing the lot stabilization, landscaping, and other requirements that were given out to them.
Right, I support that and appreciate your attention to that. So this would go into effect immediately for new homes being that will be applying.
Yeah, so for
their
the layer
TCO.
farms and Bella Terrace
Right.
development, effectively by that time that development comes around, yes, this will be coming into effect. And there's some concern over administrative aspects of it, like, do we charge the individual homeowner or do we charge the developer? But I think our goal is to make sure that the developer, the person who's responsible for the lot stabilization, the landscaping, et cetera, is the one that's actually paying the fee. But that's going to be ultimately a communication between those two entities with each other, rather than us as a city trying to mediate who should be paying it. So as long as someone's paying it, and that there's work being done towards the punch list of items needed for this, the full certificate of occupancy, the city will be satisfied.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Harrington? Back to you, Mr. Gearba.
One last question, and actually, I'm not sure, this may be Carla too, or Terry. Regarding event fee, as you mentioned it, you know, we have this event that's coming up in the park. Who got the fee, or isn't there a fee? Because it's an individual doing it and using those Mill Pond Park, so was it a request, or isn't there a fee for a festival of that nature?
There's no fee for the community event portion of it. There is a fee for the rental of the park pavilion.
All right, so you would have received a fee for that, but the community event, and that's kind of my question, as these start to come up and if more people start doing these, we should probably assess the amount of time that you're doing to make sure that those costs are covered, because we as a city cannot subsidize fundraising for other issues. Okay, thank you.
It's definitely a point of consideration. I'm sure that's going to go to the code review committee sooner rather than later, and then obviously be brought forth all of you as well, so.
Thank you, Ben.
Any additional questions? The record will reflect there are none. We do have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearboss to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. Is there any additional discussion? The record will reflect there is none. All those in favor of approving say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-166, community event application, American Legion. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the community event from the Saline American Legion, and to approve or not to approve the August 28th, 2022 fundraising event as submitted.
Move to acknowledge and to approve.
Moved by Gearbox to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Clerk Royal, do you care to make an obligatory comment for the record? No? Okay. Are there questions for the city clerk regarding this application? Mr. Gearbox?
Just clarifying, there really isn't any police service for this? This is all occurring on the American Legion's property, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And no other coordination or requirements for parking outside of their own?
They did talk to Marlene to make sure that where the parking is, that they would have access to it. As the gentleman said, they run towards bullets. They're not going to run away from fire trucks, so I couldn't argue with that one.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Why don't you hang tight, Terry, for Clerk Royal, just in the event there are additional questions. Is there any other questions from the dais? No? Easy enough. Thank you all. Thank you, Terry. Is there any discussion on the motion? Then it's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, seconded by Councilmember Dillon to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-167, community event application, Mill Pond Park. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the MI Homes application for community event, and to approve or not to approve the fundraising event for Saline Area Social Services at Mill Pond Park on July 30th as submitted.
Move to acknowledge.
receipt.
Okay, moved by, I'll let Gearboss be the mover, and Dillon be the second. That's just to acknowledge receipt.
Correct.
And Dillon, you're comfortable just moving to acknowledge receipt?
Yes, that's what I was
Okay,
moving.
very good. Clerk Royal, do you care to make a statement for the record?
This is just a community event. It's a fundraiser for the Saline Area Social Services. There's going to be food trucks, T-shirts, and festival food, taste the festival tickets. So
Before I open up for questions, we're getting a little interference with the microphones. So if you could make sure to remove your cell phones from the dais, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, are there questions for the city clerk? Councilmember Dillon.
Oh, so thank you. This first came to us as a separate little piece for food trucks.
Right.
And we did not have the event application at that time. And as we've received the application now, it seems like there's a lot of pieces that are missing from this. And I just want to make sure that we're touching upon all these things, because first, it was originally presented that it was on behalf of social services, and I feel like social services hasn't even acknowledged that they're supporting this event, so I do struggle with that a bit. But then as this is becoming an event, there's no mention of trash, of porta-johns, of police presence, of crowd control, parking, park cleanup, power and water needs. I feel like there's a lot of pieces from the event itself that have not been clarified as to what the city is providing. And so I want to make sure that we can kind of walk through that process before going forward. I mean, I think that there was a misstep on my part, I won't speak for anyone else, in that we went ahead and agreed to the food trucks, and it just seems like this has gone from something different to what it is today, and I just want to make sure that we can kind of tie it all back together.
To be perfectly honest, this is a first for me, and this is why we are revisiting the community events and food trucks and parks. We're going to all get together so that we're all on the same page, and there's one application that does all of it. So I understand your concerns. I have spoke with the lady several times, that Chrissy, who submitted this, and there will be trash pickup. There is, and they have worked with the DPW. There's also going to be hand washing stations, which they will have to pay for, but they know that there's a fee for that. So I think that this one is, yes, it's not as well prepared as what we would like it to be, but I think it's a step of where we're going for future, because I think we're going to see with food trucks in our parks, we're going to see this more and more. So I'd like to get the process narrowed down quickly, or not quickly, but this year, so that next year when we have these, we're more prepared for them.
Clerk Royal, did you confirm too that this is indeed benefiting Saline Area Social Services?
That's what I was told. And there's another one coming up at the next council meeting for Putt-Putt up by Reinhardt Realist.
In the event that council decides to postpone or not take action tonight, I would suggest an obligatory email to either Ann Cummings, the Executive Director of Saline Social Services, or Diane Hill, their office manager, just to confirm whether, in fact, they know that they're benefiting from this and have been notified of the pending event.
They have been quite busy, so I didn't reach
Sure.
out to them, so.
Not a big deal. It's
So,
just in the event that this is not acted upon tonight, I think that's confirmation that council and the community would like to have confirmed. Councilmember Dillon, additional questions?
Well, I guess I appreciate that we want to kind of hone in on a new process, but we need to deal with the application that's at hand. And so I do have concerns, like restrooms. I mean, you're going to have a festival and have 2 restrooms. I mean, are we requiring them to have porta-johns there? I mean, hand washing stations are one thing, but I mean, porta-johns, it's a several hour, it's an all-day event between their setup and their takedown. I don't think that 2 bathrooms are going to kind of cover that. They have no idea what the police, what their crowd is going to be. So, I mean, I am concerned at this point that we don't have a plan in place for police. What was mentioned originally was, yeah, the officer that's on duty will swing by. I mean, that's not saying there's going to be any kind of police presence at the actual festival, and so I'm a bit concerned about that. I mean, there's just a lot of pieces right now that I feel as though it's putting the city, on the hook if there's issues that happen with this. I mean, I know this is being very heavily marketed, and that's great, but we don't know what the backside of it's going to look like. And I say that from doing years of fireworks events. And that's a very short, time frame of and you get a lot of people that come, and there is an expectation that there is going to be, law and order there.
Any additional questions for the city clerk regarding this issue? Mr. Gearbaugh, and then I'll jump to you, Mr. Commissioner.
As you've reviewed this with new information and everything, have you basically applied all the same things that we usually request of Oktoberfest or Celtic Festival or any of those at this point?
yes, we've got the certificate of insurance, we've got the we've got approval from the DPW, the police chief, and the fire department. So people have looked at this, and of course Carla has looked at it from the point of the Parks and Rec. So, I mean, I've done everything that I know to do at this point to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, it's unfortunate now that it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, but one of my other questions on this is, as you mentioned, yet another realtor is coming forward. It seems like these, without having this clear partnership with a fundraising entity or whatever, these are becoming more of a promotional aspect for the realtor than it really is focusing on I think, the issue of what it should be for. And unfortunately, my other concern is that the damage and thing that could potentially be happening to our park and whatever else, if that happens, where is our recourse? And you're saying that it would be the
Insurance.
insurance, clearly? Okay. So they're insuring for not only liability or concerns, but any damage, whatever that we see, and then they'll have to reimburse the city should there be any.
Right.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Gearbaugh, thank you. Mr. Commander Sulak, questions for the city clerk?
Yes, thank you. I share many of the concerns about the porta-johns. It's hard for me to look at this and understand what the setup is and what are other people that utilize the park, how are they going to be impacted as far as, are they going to be able to access and go to the park and play with their kids and not be kind of shut out by this event? And I would like to see, clear of what part and what kind of partnership that Saline Area Social Services has, and that they understand what's happening and they have their stamp of approval, and their buy-in. And then are we going to have to make sure that all the rules are being followed, and I guess to help administer, but I think that's above and beyond. So I feel at a real loss and share many of the same concerns that Council Member Dillon expressed.
And I understand your concerns, but this is really a first time for something like this. And anytime it's a first time, there's a little bit of fear and concern and questions. There's a chance it could go off beautifully and no problems. I don't want to tell somebody who's doing a benefit for Saline Area Social Services that we don't want them to have it, because that seems very unfriendly. I would like Saline Area Social Services to move forward and be productive and help the community. So I'm trying to do the best at my job to help the people create the event and still get all the information that I think you guys might want when we get here. It's just not always easy to combine the two. And this was very quickly, and that's the other thing we're going to add to our new policy. It's going to be at least 30 days prior to the council meeting that you have to submit it, because there is a lot of information that I'm still trying to gather. And that's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. And the events want to happen very quickly, and I'm not always able to get everything to you.
Yeah, I get that. You're working at a loss too. I think it'd be extremely helpful to have an aerial layout of where the food trucks are going to be, where the hand washing stations, like we have for most other events.
Okay.
So that should be pretty easy for them to put together. Maybe the easiest out of everything else.
If you have a question, if we're kind of drifting into discussion here, so if you have a question for the city clerk, I welcome that.
You're right, I don't know. I have-
Okay, then let's hold off on that. Are there any additional questions for the city clerk? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just one last one. How do we handle, well, one, we talked about security, but the other one being, is there any issue, and has it been addressed by Celtic Festival regarding the river, because there's water and all that? I don't know if they do anything special for that, and would that be something that we've ever dealt with? Because this would be the only other festival we do.
Help me understand. I apologize for being obtuse.
If individuals are, how do you monitor the river during these festivals? Because, a lot of things could be going on and somebody wanders over there. But I didn't know if that's dealt differently with the festival or do we not put it?
So actually, portions of the riverbank and bed are actually fenced off during the festival, and we deliberately put some of the activities right up against the riverbank. So you know, like tents and with their various paraphernalia. So you actually would have a difficult time accessing the river. Children and adults, for that matter, do enter the river at and near the Bowley Bridge, because that's in the vicinity of Wee Folks Island. So all the children's activities are on the other side of the bridge. So it's natural that people would be entering the water in that vicinity. However, it is closely monitored by the Wee Folk chair and then his or her volunteers.
So you do or you don't put up fencing to prevent wandering into the river, or is it more just?
There's no sort of fence or barrier that would prevent somebody from entering into the river near the Bowley Bridge.
Just another security issue.
No, it's a good question. If there are no additional questions, let's vote on the motion to simply acknowledge receipt. It's been moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We can deal with a motion to approve, not to approve, or postpone with conditions.
I would move to postpone with conditions.
I would second that.
Okay, so what we not want for this motion then is to postpone for a date certain, which I assume you would want to be our next regular meeting, which is just 1 week from this evening, which would be the July the 18th. Is that correct, Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
And Councilmember Kraus, you're comfortable
Okay.
seconding that? Councilmember Dillon, I would appreciate if, for the purposes of this motion, we included some items that we wanted looked at or resolved, and I think you articulated them earlier quite well during your public comments.
Okay. Trash, restrooms, police presence, crowd control, parking, park cleanup, power and water needs.
And could we add to that list confirmation that
And then-
indeed this is benefiting Saline Social Services?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Nope, absolutely.
Can I just read you back what I have? I got, well, I added a map, a layout. Trash, restrooms, police, parking, park cleanup. I think I missed something.
Crowd control, and I don't know whether that's a part of police services. And the other is power and water needs.
And then confirmation, Clerk Royal, that this is indeed benefiting Saline Social Services.
What is power, water needs?
Power and water needs. Do any of these vendors, do any of the festivals require power or water?
Oh, got it, sorry.
Nope, that's okay.
Because there could be a concern with generators.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't thinking that direction, I was thinking restrooms.
Thank you, Councilmember Dillon. Councilmember Kraus, you're comfortable seconding that?
I am.
Okay. Perhaps I should have asked this earlier. Is there a petition, is the petitioner here? I'm sorry, I should have called on you earlier. I wasn't aware that you were representing, are you representing MI Homes? Yes, sir. Okay, would you, unless there's objection from the dais, would you care to make a comment this evening? I would love to. Okay. And obviously, I think you heard from numerous colleagues a list of some things that we would like some additional clarification on.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
absolutely. All right, so as far as Saline Area Social Services, yes, they are aware. I have been in contact with Jody, so they do know, and we also have been in contact with the Real Estate One Foundation, and they are aware that we are doing this and that they are going, and we do have confirmation that they are going to match funds as well. So for that, I can answer that. As far as trash, there's a lot of trash cans there on site, so I was assuming I could use those. If I'm not allowed to use those, then I can absolutely request to have more. So I guess a lot of this was, I wasn't exactly sure how this worked. So did I need a police presence or what the rules
Yeah,
were?
I would have you connect with, and the clerk's office can help facilitate this, a conversation with either our police chief or deputy police chief.
Okay.
Because some sort of police presence may be warranted depending on how many individuals show up.
Right.
And also doubling back to your comments on trash, because we just had a large festival down at the park this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Again, depending on the number of people that attend, the number
Yeah.
of trash receptacles that are down there to date might not be sufficient.
Okay.
So some additional either trash and or recycling containers, I think might be warranted.
Absolutely. And then I can definitely request more porta-johns. That's a very fair assessment. I have no idea how many people are coming. That's what makes it so tricky. So I don't know. I'm hoping a lot will come. I mean, on Facebook, 1.2 thousand have mentioned interested, but just because that they say that, I don't know if that, how many are actually coming, I guess. So we do have counters so that we can keep track for next year so that we have an idea of how many, but I don't know, I guess any guidance that you guys are willing to provide, I would gladly accept.
The clerk's office or city staff more broadly might have some metrics that they're able to review with
Okay,
you.
excellent, and Terry's been amazing,
Excellent.
so.
Good. So we can kind of guesstimate a number. And it also might be of value to connect with your food vendors to see how much they've promoted this. That might provide some insights of how many people will show up as well.
Okay. All right. Was there anything I missed?
I don't think so. The clerk's office will follow up with you. If we can get some of those details in writing, that will be great. And hopefully
sir.
we'll be able to approve this when we reconvene on July the 18th.
All right, thank you very much.
Mayor,
Oh, I'm sorry, please.
I'm sorry.
can I
Yes,
ask you a question, please?
absolutely, sir.
Do I understand correctly, is this going to be one of those where you buy a ticket and that entitles you to so many tastes?
Yes, sir.
Of each of the, okay. So you're the folks then who take in all the money?
Yes, sir.
Individual food vendors are not going to take in the money?
Well, they will take in money for the regular sales, but for the actual ticket sales, we will take in the money. And then at the end of the event, we give it to Saline Area Social Services, the extra, after we paid the food trucks. So we already have it worked out with the food trucks that they'll have a small plate item that's valued at $5 or less. And then they have to keep track, and on these tickets, they'll be able to just rip off the use of it so that they can keep track and have proof that they had a certain number from those, and then we can pay them out of that. And then whatever's left goes to social services.
So the money that MI Homes takes in then will be that which goes to Saline Area Social Services?
Yes, sir.
Do the food trucks make any contribution from the additional funds that they generate?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dillon, you had a question?
I do. Do you have a minimum contribution that you're planning to give? Or is it just based on total?
It's just based on whatever we earn, that's what we're going to give. And then we'll also have voting for the favorite food truck, very similar to those gift baskets that they do at the craft fair, so people can donate money in there. And then for the T-shirt sales, I do have it set up online, and the T-shirt company just automatically sends the check to Saline Area Social Services. But we will have some for sale at the event as well that we're gonna purchase ahead of time. And then those are going to be about $13 to purchase, and we're gonna charge $25, and anything over that will go to social services.
So is is any entity making money on this?
No, ma'am. Well, the food trucks.
The food trucks are making money. So MI does not leave with any, they're not making any partial. And then what is the marketing aspect of this?
So-
As far as for MI, what is MI getting out of this?
Name recognition. So our names are on the flyers and the signs that we are
Are
having.
they on the
put up.
T-shirts?
Yes, ma'am. As are the food trucks and vendors. So Hartman Insurance is awesome. They actually are donating the insurance because it's for Saline Area Social Services to raise money, so their logo is on it. And then we're having Foaling Warehouse come, and they're gonna have I actually don't exactly know what Foaling is. It's something to do with football and bowling. So, I don't know, but their names are on the logo, or their logo is on the back as well, and then all the food trucks who have submitted their logos are on the back too.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Any additional questions for our applicant? Ms. Kraus?
Just one, about the police situation, so I always think worst-case scenario, which maybe is my personality flaw, but you mentioned in your application, you might need it, you might not, you're not sure. And then I know you spoke with Chief Radzik, and she gave you some options about bike patrol. When it comes back to us, I think that there should be a clear request there, because if we have to consider overtime, that should be part of our calculus.
Okay.
When we are deciding, with funds tight and whatnot, we should definitely know ahead of time what money we might need to put up. Another question I had, it just caught me funny, Hartman's donating the insurance. So I was an insurance agent for 15 years, and I don't know where we could do that. I'm curious about that.
I don't know either.
Work to make sure the city's protected if somebody did fall into the river or if somebody was injured. How does that work?
It's a typical policy. They said, or they know to name you guys as additionally insured.
Yep.
Because Hartman's done other events for you guys.
So they're paying for like a special event policy or something like that?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I see. And so will we get that certificate of insurance to look at then next week when we discuss this?
We certainly can.
I think that would be nice to have, just to
Okay.
make sure the city's protected. So,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
No problem, thank you.
Mr. Gearba?
And are you still continuing to do a raffle? Because that probably would require a gaming license.
We are not doing a raffle because we didn't really have anything, because by the time we paid for all the signs and things, it's kind of a lot of money, so.
Just wanted to make sure that you didn't run into trouble with that one.
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Apologize that I didn't realize that you were here representing In My Homes.
No problem.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you possibly next week. We do have a motion on the floor to postpone to a date certain, which is July 18th with conditions. Are there any additional questions or discussions pertaining to that motion? I think it's been moved by Dillon, seconded by Kraus. Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-168, community event application UAW car show. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the application from the UAW, actually the UAW Local 892, and to approve or not to approve the July 31st, 2022 fundraising event as submitted.
Move to acknowledge?
Moved by Dillon, simply to acknowledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Gearba. Clerk Royal, do you care to make a statement?
This is a UAW car show, and they are holding it all on their property. They have a front lot where people will park, and then the car show is being held in the back, so they won't have any issues with people crossing. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions, Councilmember Dillon?
So I just wanted to make the clarification that this is private property, and so it's a different sort of event than the previous one. But I do want to, and the only reason I moved to acknowledge and not just immediately move to approve was that I would like to have this approval, should it go forward, conditioned upon a report from the police department, because that one, I believe, has not been submitted yet.
Marlene is not here, yes.
Correct.
Yeah,
So just having it conditional upon the police approval.
okay.
Mr. Gearba is the second. Any questions?
Just in this example, they would pay the $150 event fee or not?
No,
And that's because,
we don't have a community event fee.
It's not at a park. It's on private property.
It's
Okay.
private property, yeah. We're just trying to make sure that anybody who's there is safe, that, we've contacted DPW, the fire department, and the police, just to make sure that if they have any concerns, but this would not be the same as a park or for a,
yeah.
yeah.
Again, this goes back to all the staff time and everything that goes into it, so I know we don't necessarily want to do this, but as this starts to expand, as it sounds, it may be time, especially if we've got to have everybody spending a half hour or so on it. Not to a deterrent, but more of a cautiousness.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for the city clerk? Record will reflect there are none. Thank you, Terry. If there's no discussion on a motion to simply acknowledge receipt, we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearba to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve, not approve, or approve with conditions?
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearba to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamir Sulek. Is there any additional discussion? Mr. Seal.
Yes, Your Honor. I realize this is the first time, is it not, for this kind of a car show at UAW?
It's actually the second time. They did this last year.
Was it?
Yep.
Do they have any counts for the first event?
Did they give us any idea of attendance?
The only reason I asked that question is this last weekend, my wife and I were in Holly, Michigan, and, not Holly, in Milford. And there were a lot of classic cars cruising up and down the street, a lot of modern cars that were obviously, sport models, various types, revving engines and so on. And it just appeared to me that there was a lot of additional traffic in town over and above what a normal summer day would call for. And sure enough, when we left town, traveling south on Milford Road, there was a car show being put on by some private entity. So it created quite a large volume of traffic. I would would assume above and beyond what normally was generated in the town for that kind of a day. And I'm just wondering what the impact might be on the overall community. Is this thing, you know, if it becomes popular and grows, how many additional people come and just cruise because of the kind of event that's going on? So I would just say that I think we need to keep our eye on it, maybe with particular attention for the police department to monitor traffic conditions.
I think that's legitimate, Mr. CEO. I would say that based on the day of the week, the time of the day, and the fact that it's being done in summer, at least initially, I don't envision a significant impact to the adjacent neighborhoods or local streets. I mean, it's a weekend. A lot of the industrial businesses are not operating. Obviously, school's not in session because it's summer. But I think it's certainly something that we can keep an eye on. Mr. Gearbaugh, additional questions?
Just,
or comments?
Parking might be a concern there if they use the whole lot for displaying cars, and then people that want to stop, there really isn't a lot around there except perhaps Linden or parking along Woodland. So I'm not sure. It's just, Mr. Steele has a good point.
And while there isn't a condition within this motion, I think engaging the police chief, having her review that when she returns to the office either tomorrow or Wednesday, and having that information then disseminated to us likely through the city manager's weekly communique would be prudent.
And do we want to find out how many cars they have? Because I see that there's going to be 8 vendors. So I was assuming that means there was going to be 8 cars, but.
No, I would suspect to be more cars than that.
Okay. So I can contact her and see if she has a
Great.
number.
Great.
And I'll let you know that also.
Any additional comments? We have a motion on the floor to approve. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We come to our last new business item, which is 22-169 marijuana ordinances update. Let's start with just a motion to acknowledge receipt, because I have a feeling this will generate some discussion. There might be some modifications or changes to the ordinances.
Move it or second it.
Moved by Gear. You'll be the mover. Is there a second? I'll second, actually. Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Marl to simply acknowledge receipt of the July 6th memo. Mr. Harrington, would you like to begin? And then since this went to code review, if our council colleague, Mr. Delorco, would like to provide some insights, we would welcome that as well.
Yes, so per the code review and per the ongoing events of the last month, there was a conversation about revisiting the marijuana ordinance, specifically how the buffer zone is applied with 2 key issues. Proposed daycare, which was not necessarily defined when it was given to code review, as well as considering expanding the buffer zone beyond 250 feet. And then what became kind of like a side tangent along with expanding the buffer zone was how are we defining the buffer zone? What are we measuring to and from? So in the July 6th memo, just for the public's consideration, if they hadn't had the opportunity to review it, my memo looked at that consideration of daycare as part of the buffer zone, the size of the buffer zone, whether it would be prudent to expand from 250 to 500 or 1,000, as well as how we measure the buffer zone. So currently staff measures the buffer zone from building to building, which, as I identify in the memo, is really practically difficult unless you wanted me to take a tape measure and walk across Michigan Avenue, as well as not have that contested by any dispensary that would be interested in locating in the city. That'd be a challenge. So staff recommends moving it to a parcel-to-parcel buffer zone for ease and both legal aspects and enforcement measures. As for the daycare, we would ask for further classification, consideration, as well as to answer some of the questions outlined in the memo. As at the moment, if we passed an ordinance with just daycare, it'd be hard to enforce from a staff perspective. However, we did include proposed ordinance 844, which uses child care facilities, which is clearly defined within our code of ordinances, and it is in the memo too. It's a licensed operation by the city, has 5 or more children, and they have to renew on an annual basis. And as well, staff performs background checks on all their employees. So there's just an aspect of consideration there. I would just ask that you look at the comments and the questions that I asked within the memo and evaluate it. We don't need a clear answer tonight, but it would be helpful to know going forward how we can best enforce this and make Saline work with the marijuana industry as best as we can.
Very good. Thank you for that. Mr. Delorco, as the liaison to the Code Review Committee, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This came to the Code Review Committee during the moratorium for evaluation and discussion. We took direction from both our legal counsel and Mr. Harrington's staff representative to make a modification of the ordinance that solely deals with the definition between the buffers of building to building or parcel to parcel. And we thought it'd be effectively a way to kill two birds with one stone, because we recognize that some felt, both on the Code Review Committee and on council, that some more stringent buffer zones should be included, and expanding the definition or clarifying the definition from building to building to parcel does provide some additional buffering capacity there. As far as the schools go, schools are schools. Daycare center does not meet that criteria. The recommendations that we were told was that daycares have far less permanence, and that can create a lot of difficulty for us moving forward as a community as they open their doors and then potentially close their doors or relocate their businesses. And they are not subject to the same taxation regulation and hours of operation as a state licensed school. So there is a difference and a distinction there. However, it is a policy issue, and the council is free to deliberate on that matter.
Very good, thank you for that. Appreciate that additional background. I'll just start to my left and work my way to my right. Mr. Gearbaugh, any questions for Mr. Delorco, Mr. Harrington, or staff more broadly?
Not at this time. I'll wait for discussion.
Easy enough. Councilmember Dillon, any questions?
So we keep mentioning daycare. I believe it was mentioned in public comment that I thought the term we were looking at was preschools. Are they defined separately?
They're actually not defined at all, which is the trouble in crafting this memo for you, is that we do not define daycare, we do not define preschool. We could use a Webster's or potentially a state definition for those things, but it gets a little dicey there because it's not specifically called out in our ordinance. So all we define are child care facilities, which could be seen as a daycare or a preschool. If it was owned by the school district, though, so if the school district purchased a pre-K facility within the city of Saline, because it's school district property, then that buffer zone would end up applying the 1,000 feet buffer zone. But if it's a privately owned facility, we can only go off the child care facilities. But any preschool with 5 or more students would likely be classified, or almost certainly be classified under child care facilities per our ordinance, which is what proposed ordinance 844 is.
How do other municipalities and the state in general classify preschools? Like, because I thought this whole discussion came about was there is actually language. We just didn't include it.
There's language for child care licensing. We'd have to do more research whether the state has a further search tool to delineate between a daycare and a preschool, but all we've been able to find is, from a tangential search, child care licensing. So if council wanted to go that direction, we have language for what a child care facility is, and the state has a very easy to access tool for identifying licensed child care facilities.
Okay. And so just so I'm clear, when we talk now about the new buffer zone, we're talking parcel to parcel, so it's closest to closest?
Yes, it would be the shortest distance between two parcels, which is measurable and definable, unlike a building-to-building policy, which is a lot more challenging in terms of what corner of the building am I measuring from. If you're talking about the suite to which wall, there are a lot of issues, I think, that open liability to the city in terms of if we tell someone they're 248 feet away from the nearest, from the nearest marijuana facility, now that leaves us open to liability. How do we get that 248-foot measurement? Parcels are more clearly defined by the county. They're more clearly defined in a deed. It's a lot easier to work with that figure, I believe, and leaves us open to less liability, as well as just a clear, more easy to follow guideline for businesses that are interested in locating in Saline.
And is it parcel to parcel based on current at that moment in time when you're making that decision? So if a parcel were to acquire additional land in some other way, like it can't be reconfigured, correct?
Well, so there's an issue there too, because there's always the idea that you could subdivide, and I think that opens a can of worms that we can consider also. But so it'd be considered when they file the application, what is their parcel boundary line?
Okay.
Because that's how the county defines it, and I think that's the easiest way to go off of it. But, if someone did choose to subdivide their parcel, they would have to create 2 conforming lots. Otherwise, they would go to the ZBA. So they can't make one lot that's like 5 feet by 100 feet, because it's not a conforming lot per our zoning code. At which point, they would need a variance, they need subdivision approval from the planning commission, and it adds extra layers of review over it. So I think no matter which way you slice it with that, parcel to parcel was gonna have more oversight should someone try to skirt the rules rather than tearing down a building, moving it 10 feet over, and then building a new building that would meet the 250-foot requirement.
Okay, that's exactly what I was getting at, so thank you very much for that. The one thing that it seems silent on in here, and I apologize if I missed it, was I thought we were gonna talk about buffers to residential. Did that become a non-issue?
I don't believe that was considered at the code review committee. If Mr. Delorco would like to comment on that, that wasn't considered at any of the meetings that I attended.
Okay.
I believe there was a brief reference to that subject during code review, but there was no further conversation or guidance at that time.
Okay. That's correct. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. CO, any questions?
Just a statement, if I might, Your Honor.
Sure.
First of all, thank you very much for your memo. I thought it was very complete and raised a lot of questions and put a lot of these ideas in a firmer framework for me so that I could understand better, I think, exactly what we need to do and where we need to go. I favor the parcel to parcel because I think that gives unambiguous delineation of what we intend in the ordinance, and I think that's what we intended from the get-go. Doorway to doorway, center to center, all those things raise so many questions and create so many additional possibilities that I think we just open ourselves to further headaches and litigation. So I think I favor the parcel to parcel as is delineated in, was it 843? I do not favor the language in 844 because I think those daycare facilities are too temporal. They come and they go. A lot of them are based in homes, and I think that's possible to be moved easily when one provider moves from one home to another and so on. So I think that the schools gives the clearest identity to what we mean by school facilities within the ordinance, and I think that's where we ought to stay. So that's what I have to say.
Mr. Commissioner Sulak, any questions for city staff?
Yes, I do. How are other communities handling this? And I know that we're not like Ann Arbor, and we're vastly different from Ypsilanti. But just in general, was there some research to give us kind of a baseline of how other communities with similar medical and recreational?
Right, so I've talked to Planner Auerbach, who's more familiar with the uses in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, so it's a little bit of a apples to oranges things, as you just pointed out there. I know our buffer zone is smaller than other communities. They usually are somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet. I do believe that all the other communities are doing the parcel to parcel simply for the ideas identified here. If they do a buffer zone, some of them chose the hard cap. But obviously, I think as you worked out with Attorney Forshee and my predecessor, there are other risks that you run with doing a hard cap on the number of dispensaries within a city versus the buffer zone strategy to, both spread them out and avoid clustering, as well as avoid the raw amount of them that could avoid the raw amount that could accumulate within one city. So it's a kind of a hodgepodge across the state because the state gave so much authority to the municipalities to decide how they wanted to handle this issue. But I think a parcel to parcel boundary is within line. The 250 feet, albeit smaller because of our really restrictive zoning in terms of the only 2 areas they could locate, I think it ultimately becomes comparable to many other cities around the state.
Okay, that helps clarify that for me, and I also commend you for all the information that you put forth. It helped made it really clear on what we're looking at tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus, any questions for city staff?
I do not have any questions.
Easy enough. We'll do one other additional round if anybody has any questions. Mr. Delorco, my apologies. I didn't call on you. I know you're well-versed on these issues, having discussed them at length at code review, but if you had questions for city staff, we would welcome those.
I have no questions, Your
Okay.
Honor.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just what do you recommend in terms of the footage to increase our buffer zone from 250 to 500 or to 1,000 or in between that, or?
You know, at the moment, I would defer to the city manager, who I think had more insight on that specific issue in terms of increasing it. Personally, I think the 250 parcel to parcel within the current zoning framework, I think is adequate, especially because that prohibits co-location within the same strip center, if it's parcel to parcel, how the ordinance is written. So I think it spreads it out a little bit more, but.
City Manager O'Toole?
If we're able to adopt the parcel-to-parcel change, I think that effectively resolves a lot of the clustering concern that the 250 may not have been sufficient to address. The 250, again, there's kind of two sides to that coin. One, we effectively limited the licensing to specific zones, so it's on the far west and the far east side of the city. But it is more typical to see 500 to 1,000 feet. So it's a matter of, I guess, what precedent you want to follow. If you want to adopt policies that are more in line with buffering that we share with neighbors, I would say 500, certainly not 1,000 because of how limited it already is. But if you're comfortable with the limits that are already in place just through the zoning regulations, then it may be satisfactory to leave the 250.
Because one of my concerns, and I guess this would be the question, so think of the Sauk Trail Shopping Center. We've already spun off the Imagine Theater property, and that was done as a condo, but it was split off. So you could potentially do the one side and then the other side, and they'd still be 250 feet if they're subdivided, if they sell those lots off.
I believe the subdivision process requires planning commission approval, and then I believe if they did the condo strategy too, it would require a ZBA approval for variant, because I think it still creates a non-conforming lot as far as I'm concerned. So I think that would be a further consideration at that point, and once again, there's an additional checks and balances. You'd have to prove an actual hardship for some of that as well, which I think a lot of these establishments would fail to meet.
I mean, fortunately, they're close to the school property, but we don't know what could happen on that corner, and if they should split that off, then they could potentially develop something there in that property, so. And then the other one, I guess, what would you recommend in terms of, as one of our citizens mentioned, the mandated preschool issue? I understand the child care facility, that I think is an issue. We're never gonna know what's going where and when, and it could cause all kinds of problems, but I'm just curious on the preschool, do we think that would be a different category at this time?
I would have to do more research with Community Development Director Harrington to know if that's something that we could easily determine. Really, from staff's perspective, the policy choices are yours. We just want to answer the question of, is this something we're going to be able to implement effectively and in a straightforward, consistent manner? I don't know the answer to that question yet.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's the understanding that specifically, is it something that we feel strong enough on that? So having more information, that would be helpful.
And so if I could just comment on your last point as well before we entered the school issue, you know, they also, for the condo issue, would have to do a SLU document and prove they need a special land use. And I think, once again, that's an additional check and balance in the case of an attempted subdivision or a subdivision-like process.
Yeah, and in that area, it's SBA 1, so there's a lot of things you can do. So I know it's all requiring special approvals and such. And as much as we had hoped that a special use permit would allow us to do a little more subjecting it to scrutiny, it's not showing it to do that, so.
I think with the creation of an additional lot, I think you have a little bit more protection there in terms of how that complies with the master plan, as well as how that works with city infrastructure, amongst other things. So I think there's a little bit more leeway you would have if someone tried to subdivide and create an additional lot or otherwise condo their property, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dillon, any additional questions?
I do have one question. I know at one point there was talk of overlay maps. Was that ever actually created that showed what those buffer zones were? And
Yes, so those materials were created for the Code Review Committee. I'm happy to share them in my weekly communication.
okay.
They showed how the buffers, they specifically took current applicants and show how the buffers would impact surrounding properties.
You know, I know that we say the 250 is sufficient. It's sufficient today. What happens as the city grows? I mean, should we look to the future of, okay, well, what if the west side expands? Are we going to be looking at then 250 is not really the sufficient buffer because now we have a new parcel that's there? So I don't know if I want to keep rehashing it, so if the standard is 500 or 1,000 feet, I feel like, if we're going to do this sort of a modification at this point, we should do it now, and then we know moving forward that it's in place. I just feel like you just don't know what, especially on the west side, what that property is going to look like.
Yeah, so I will add that any additional lots added to the city, either by annexation or redevelopment, would have to go through the rezoning process. We have 3 different commercial districts as well as a special planning district. I think we have a lot of leeway in how we would zone those properties, and I think that would absolutely be at the forefront of staff's opinion when looking how we're going to rezone those properties, whether it would be a C1, a C2, or C3, whether it be you extend or create a new SPA district on the western side to create the gateway on both ends of the city. I think there's a lot of options there, but ultimately, whether you increase the buffer zone, I think is a policy decision, and staff will support whatever you choose to do.
I just want to make sure that in, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whenever that were to happen, who's going to remember this conversation tonight? Who knows if current staff is going to be here to remember, hey, you know what, we said we were going to do this if this happened, if we were to annex in, we were going to create, and look at this. So I just want to make sure that there's a process in place so it doesn't slip through the cracks at some point. Because, I always had thought that 250 was too low of a number in comparison to other communities. I don't think we found any other community that had 250. And so if we're looking at sort of being on par with others, should we just do that now and just move forward? We're already going to be modifying and clarifying, so to change that piece of it, it's not going to impact anything today. It's just for future use.
Mr. Seal, any additional questions?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Commander Sulak?
Nothing further.
Councilmember Kraus? Okay, very good. Then we do have a motion on the floor. I believe it was moved by Gearboss, seconded by Marl, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously, and the chair is happy to entertain a motion to approve and adopt, not to approve with conditions, or to postpone or defer to a later date.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to postpone till next week so we had a little more time to answer some of the questions that came up.
I would actually second that. So it's been properly moved and second to a date certain of July 18th. Let me just say, and then Mr. Gearbaugh, I'll jump back to you. I'd like to be a little bit more thoughtful on this preschool issue, on the matter that Councilmember Dillon, our colleague, just articulated regarding buffers, and to a point that was raised during the public comment period. If this motion were to pass, I think it provides staff, more specifically our PR department, to do some educating and dissemination of information between now and the 18th to make sure that our property owners, stakeholders, and residents are well aware that City Council will be considering some revisions to our marijuana ordinance at our next regular meeting, which is just 1 week away. So I don't see any harm in postponing this by 7 days. Mr. Gearbaugh, anything you'd like to add?
Just the only thing I want to say is I do support the parcel to parcel, just to make sure that at this point in time, I think that is a definite go-ahead. The other ones, I need to have a little more information.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor, then moved by Gearboss, seconded by Marl, to postpone to a date certain, which is July the 18th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries 6-1. We move on to the discussion portion of the agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. I'll start to my left with Councilmember Del Orco.
I haven't met with the committee since the last meeting, so I'll have more to talk about that at the next one.
Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Just that we haven't met for planning a couple weeks, but we will be meeting this Wednesday to discuss marijuana facilities, one that we'll be placing potentially the car wash that's between McDonald's and Chelsea Lumber, and then also a potential facility on the west side near the, I'm not sure what the name of that particular development is, but next to the liquor store. So those will be on the Planning Commission meeting. And then also, today we met reviewing legal services, again with what we're starting to whittle down recommendations for a new legal, or continuing with the existing legal. Probably in the next few weeks, we'll have a response back for the council.
Very good. The other one that I have to report out on is the Celtic Festival, which was this past Friday and Saturday. I was not able to attend on Friday evening, but from all reports, it was a success, albeit we did have some rain right as the gates opened at 5 o'clock. I don't have final numbers. I won't have final numbers for probably the better part of a month, maybe two. But I think in terms of dollars and participants, I have not seen, at least in my tenure as mayor, more people enjoying themselves and congregating at Mill Pond Park this past Saturday. Obviously, the weather was perfect. I think there was a lot of pent-up desire to attend community events because we had had a 2-year hiatus. But by all accounts, at least initially, it was a successful festival. As soon as I have some hard numbers, I will be sure to share those. Councilmember Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Not at this time.
Mr. CO?
No, sir.
Mr. Kamir Sulak?
Yes, just one real quick. The DEI committee, the Pride celebration picnic on June 25th at the Pavilion, Taft Park, right behind the rec center, went very well, was well attended, and thanks for everyone who attended, and look forward to next year. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus?
Well, Ms. Dillon and I did attend Friday night at the Celtic Festival, and that was very fun. So not as well attended as we would have liked, but the rain, it was, but the band was great, the Pretty Legs, yeah, it was all very festive and fun and good to be out. Healthcare Task Force, as the mayor indicated in his address, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we unfortunately aren't at liberty to speak publicly about right now, but we have been meeting with different regional healthcare CEOs, and there is interest at different levels with each of the different organizations. The survey continues to be out and about, and so we will keep everyone posted as we can. There's a lot of interest in Saline, as we are kind of a hub for the southwest portion of the county, and so we will proceed on and keep doing the work until we have something more substantive to mention.
Very good. Let's transition to reports and other announcements. Mr. Delorco, do you have any?
I have none.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
On behalf of the Historical Society, we want to thank all the citizens in Saline. We had a great turnout for the 4th of July celebration that we held on July 2nd. We figure over 250 people showed. And so it was a great event, and we look forward to our next event, which is going to be the US 12 Heritage Yard Sale, which is August 12th and the 13th at the Rentschler Farm. And there are booth space available, so please consider. And looking forward to seeing all of you out that next event. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, any reports or announcements?
I do not.
Mr. CO?
No, sir.
Mr. Kamir Sulak? Councilmember Kraus? Easy enough. And our final item is a forthcoming ethics policy. Who is taking the lead on this? City Manager O'Toole?
Certainly.
Okay.
So I was asked by members of council to share an update on where we are with the creation of what was originally thought of to be potentially an ethics ordinance. Quickly, just a refresher for everyone. So previously, council discussed at a work session the need for some sort of ethics governance. That draft was created based on the State Attorney General's opinion. It was provided in a very rough form, just really introduced in concept to the Code Review Committee. At that time, I was able to then pull together both our Labor Council and our General Counsel to sit down. I had a very productive series of conversations with our attorneys, presented a draft then subsequently to Code Review that took a fairly different form, though generally speaking still touched on all the issues originally outlined in that Attorney General's document. And at that point, consensus really started to form around, based on legal opinion from both attorneys, the fact that this really should take the form of a policy instead of an ordinance, primarily because there was no real legal precedent that would allow us to turn this into an enforceable action. There's very strict state statutes that govern any sort of consequence for ethical violations by elected officials. As such, that's the position that we're in now. We have a draft policy which was shared with you all for this meeting, and I welcome any feedback that members may have at this time.
Has Code Review voted, since it's not an ordinance, I guess they're not technically obligated to, but have they voted this out or discharged it to City Council?
No, the conversation revolved around, again, just general consensus that a policy did make sense based on legal opinion. And then there was some additional conversation that arose around the formation of the body that would form the ethics committee and what membership for that might look like. We have some outstanding direction for Attorney Forshee to do some follow-up research on that question.
Okay. Let me start then with Councilmember Kraus. Any questions or comments regarding the proposed policy?
I don't. I just want to make sure that we keep it very separate. The board, however that happens, you know, there's different ideas we can talk about. I would never be a fan of something that was kept in-house or something like that. Otherwise, no, it's looking good.
Mr. Kamara Sulak?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Seal?
I just had some questions about some of the missing teeth. The pages are not, they don't follow. I don't have the complete document. Mine goes from the end of section 1.2 to section 2.6. So, and then on the back page, I think I'm missing paragraph 3 because it goes right to section 3.5. So,
I think you're missing some pages there, Jack.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you a complete copy. The
is
full
in the
copy is on the online packet.
Yeah.
But we can
I
get you a
noticed that
printed
too.
copy as
Why
well.
don't we follow up with Mr. Seal tomorrow and make sure he has a complete draft policy? And then if you'd like to follow up, Jack, with some questions or concerns for staff, we will.
sure, no, what I could read made perfect sense to me. So, just don't have the complete policy.
Fair enough. Ms. Dillon, any comments or questions?
I actually had the same question, that I wasn't sure whether there was a numbering issue or if there were.
Sounds like a
because-
copying issue.
Yeah, so there's definitely some sections missing. I think we're on the right track. I do think that this warrants a work meeting where we all sit down and make sure that we're sort of all on the same page about it. As Ms. Kraus said, I would be more in favor of having an outside entity, third party, for review, not of the document, but for any situations that arise. I do believe that there is issues that come about when anything that could happen with a city council member that involves staff. There's two different sets of policies that are in place there. And the city has a duty to their employees over city council. So I don't know that that's the right place for anything to live. And so I would like to make sure that we're all on the same page about that.
Mr. Gearbaugh, any comments or questions?
I just would like to have it pulled back so that we can discuss it at council's level as soon as we can, because we've been looking at this for almost 6 months now. But I do like the idea of a third-party investigation outside of a board or whatever, just to make it as clean, as clear that we can without having potential, appointment of individuals on the board and all that. It's just another committee that hopefully we are going to be so infrequent with this kind of concern that it would be worth doing it as an investigation and not having to waste, I don't want to say waste, but having to spend all our resources and such in trying to resolve something like that.
Very good. Mr. Delorco, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I thought Colleen did an excellent job of laying out what was discussed at the code review. The outstanding issue, as many of you have expressed, is this being an independent body. And as the ordinance currently exists, there's a proposal to appoint 2 members of the council to this ethics committee. And I faithfully represented the opinions of this body at the code review discussions and meeting, and that's something Attorney Forshee is going to look more into. We're still discussing the matter, and we hope to shore that up at our next meeting, and then we can bring it back and discuss it. It's because of the change in trajectory going from an ordinance to a policy. We need to be mindful. I think it's 80% of the way there, and if it's the council's opinion that this should be a truly independent body, then I plan to echo those concerns at the code review meetings.
Okay, I guess my suggestion at this juncture would be, let me take a step back. Did you indicate, City Manager O'Toole, that Mr. Forshee still had to get you some data or plug some of the gaps that exist in the existing policy?
It really was just some subsequent research on, I guess, pros and cons of whether having a council liaison to that body would or would not be appropriate.
Okay. Do you think you would hear, do you think you'd have something tangible to report on that issue by our first meeting in August, which is the 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would suggest, unless there's objection, is let's put a placeholder on August 1st, maybe at 6 PM, to have a work meeting on this. In the interim, I want to make sure all council members have the most updated draft of the policy to review.
Yep.
And obviously, between now and August 1st, if that works for everybody, please direct any questions, concerns to the city manager. If you'd like to meet and chat with her at length about this proposed policy, that would be fine as well. My hope is that on the 1st, we could develop consensus and then consider this for approval at the subsequent meeting, which would be our second meeting in August. Does the 1st work for everybody at 6 PM? I don't think we need more than an hour. I think that would be sufficient. Okay. Is there anything else anybody would like to bring up on this issue? No? Okay. All right, then it appears we have some consensus to move forward. If there's nothing further to be brought up under the discussion portion of tonight's meeting, we come now to the second public comment period. At this time, you can speak about anything you desire to speak to. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? You'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have very brief comments, hopefully within 2 minutes. 2 parts. Number one is just following JP's public comment first about how important SALT project is going to be. It's not just the landmark art and building, it is communication too. It's public communication using LED software and any other Wi-Fi. It is very important for Saline to have this new way of public communication, especially for safety. You might just look at the agenda. There are 4 things, 4 events. Events, show, sell, safety. All of these need communication. In a public gathering, we need public communication tool, not just through the paper-based or screen-based. SALT project have the light show. There's one of the things, if you can do your homework, please read that section called the DD, box DD. So please read that. The communication using the display, it is very important. JP already have the software, tiny window and tiny view. Saline is a great place to initiate this new kinds of forward-looking communication tool, new media, text ring. Text ring is going to be, oh, I'm sorry.
It's probably me. It was probably me, Changman. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. You owe me 5 seconds.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, so I will try to finish in 2 minutes. I want to get a point. So we need, just like Jack initiated this radio many years ago, we have a new frontier. So post-COVID time is started. Saline should lead. You guys should lead. I will follow. So event, show, sell, and safety. So the second part of the safety. The event we have, as Mr. Mayor say that, very successful. But one thing, as Janet Dillman, later we forget what it is. So something proactively we have to prepare. Lightning rod. If you look at there, from the ground to there is more than 18 feet. That's a rod. It takes me such a long time with another engineer. Pound it over there. The rod, the big thick rod. So we should proactively, as Ms. Mayor mentioned at the very beginning, proactively prepare something for this public event, public safety lightning rod. So I have to go, so thank you. I would encourage you consider we have some kind of like place to not kill this rod or take it away or forget about that. So next time I will go into more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? Anybody? No?
Matthew Rockwell. I'm talking about the on item 22-69, the 250 feet apart of a parcel for this marijuana thing. I think you guys should make it at least a longer feet than 250. It's gotta be, because one, you gotta look at where it's going. It's going that way. Behind it, you have houses and apartments. If you're going that way, you have more houses and apartments. You guys have to start looking at the significant problems of this. One, you're gonna have guns brought. Two, you're gonna have a lot of trouble, and I've seen that already in different parts. Three, you guys ain't thinking right. Mr. CO, you used to be a cop. Mr. CO, you would pull me over because I'm not using a law called Norton versus Domingo from 18 versus Shelby County in a county in Tennessee. You guys have to think about that law and think about us citizens out of a citizen's rule book. So, therefore, as you guys are elected, you guys must start carrying around a citizen rule book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Any additional citizen comments on, actually not on agenda items? Anything you'd like to speak about this evening?
First and foremost, I don't think a lot of these establishments are going to bring in a lot of crime. I've never said that at all. I would like to elaborate that I think increasing it to 500, at least 500 would be a good thing. Number one, it'd limit the number of dispensaries that can come into town and take up a spot that could be used by another business that would like to come in. But number two, it kind of limits the number that's going to be in our town that, you know, could open, close, because it is a problem in other municipalities where they come in, they leave. So we need to consider that, and I hope you would consider that. What I'm about to talk about now is something else. I noticed lately that the dog is missing from the firehouse, and it's really sad. I'm disgusted at what happened to the dog in June when it was vandalized for Pride Month. And it was vandalized more than once. And I'm not buying that stuff blew off. June was pretty dry, let's face it. And then July 1st rolls around, and it's decorated for 4th of July, and then it just disappears. And my children and I, we love that dog. We love driving by and seeing all the different holidays that it was, you know, dressed up for, the different events in town, graduation. In the fall, it's decorated for football games. I mean, it's a great, unique part of our town, and everybody has to admit that. But it was taken down, let's face it, because of people's behaviors. And I think as a community, right now, we have two sides, and they're just fighting back and forth, and it's really sad. Nobody should have to violate anybody's civil rights and attack them for being who they are. And that's what was happening in June. And then July rolls around, and people are sitting there saying, well, I'm not going to dress in red, white, and blue because of what happened last month with the dog. Like, we got to stop fighting, and we got to come together. And I'd like to see the dog come back and kind of be decorated again and try to unify this town. So I hope somebody can find that out why it's not up and get it back out there so we can come together as a community and celebrate our uniqueness as a community and all people of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments this evening? Clerk Royal, did we receive any communiques in advance of tonight's meeting or during tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? No, sir. No? Okay. Then is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? Please note our upcoming meetings, and the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn. I've got 8:59.
So moved?
Moved by Kraus to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.